Next up, we have Chelsie Romulo, who is a PhD student at George Mason University, focusing her research on conserving and sustainably managing an ecologically, culturally, and economically important palm tree in the Peruvian Amazon. The fruit of the aguaje palm tree is harvested in the wild, so Chelsie's work is really focused on understanding why the motivation people are for harvesting and selling the fruit, and also examining the distribution of the fruit for over the last 25 years. Having this understanding is really important for providing recommendations and on conservation and sustainable management of this threatened palm. Chelsea's favorite plant is the redwood trees because they are fire resistant. And this is also Chelsea's first year here as a BIA fellow, so we are very excited to have her, and I welcome you and join me in welcoming Chelsie.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited to be a Botany in Action Fellow and to share some of my research with you today. I became interested in this species because of my background in conservation biology. And when I call myself a conservation biologist, what I mean is that I'm interested in how people use natural resources, and specifically how we can develop ways to use natural resources sustainably. So for today's talk, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the ecology of this species and the fruit market, and then go into the conservation issues and my research objectives. So I'm in the beginning of my doctoral program, so I'm just starting to collect data and do some analysis. So what I'm talking to you about today is what I'm proposing to do. So aguaje is a palm tree that is found throughout the Amazon basin, which is one forest that is the size of the entire lower 48 United States, so it's huge. And this tree can form quite dense stands of up to hundreds of acres, where almost the only tree in the canopy is this one tree. These forests, or these sections of the forest that are made up of aguaje, cover about 10% of the Peruvian Amazon, so it's a good chunk of the forest. This species produces a fruit that's about the size of a lemon, and it's red and scaly looking. Each tree can produce hundreds to thousands of fruit every year, so it's a very, very productive plant. And as you can imagine, being a very productive species, and because there is a lot of these trees in the forest, it's an important food source for a lot of different animal species. So one of my colleagues actually sets up camera traps in the forest to collect pictures of animals that eat this fruit, such as the coatimundi. So this is a member of the raccoon family, and if some of you follow nature news, last year the Smithsonian actually discovered a new species in this family in the Amazon rainforest, and we suspect that it does eat aguaje as well. These are peccary, which are a type of wild pig that depend on aguaje as a food source, and they're also hunted by indigenous people, so they're an important food source for people living in the Amazon as well. These are red wakari monkeys, which are a very rare species of monkey that's only found in certain places in Peru. And so they depend on aguaje and actually live in the aguaje stands and eat the fruit as well. So the fruit is not only important for animal species, but it's also harvested for consumption in the cities. And the fruit markets in the city of Iquitos are quite large, and you can find aguaje in the city all throughout the year. This is a city of about 500,000 people, which means it's about 1.5 times the city of Pittsburgh. So you can imagine that this represents quite a bit of activity in terms of harvesting fruit and bringing it into the city to support the population. Oops. So the fruit arrives in the market in 100-pound sacks, and then it's divided into piles based on quality. And the people that do this, we call them wholesalers. There's only about 30 of them, but they sell to vendors, which there are about 3,000 of them in the city, who then sell it to consumers. And almost everybody in the city enjoys this fruit in the form of ice cream or juice, or even eaten whole. And so you can find it on almost every street corner. So I've given you a little bit of background information just about the plant, but you might be wondering why I'm interested in studying it. there's a very interesting conservation issue that has two main parts. The first is that a lot of fruit is coming into the city. We monitored the number of sacks coming into Iquitos for 18 months. And the number never got below 500 sacks, and on the highest days, it was over 2,000, and that's every single day. And when you think about the fact that it can take several trees worth of fruit to fill up one sack, this represents a lot of trees. The second issue is that in order to harvest the fruit, people cut down the tree. And they do this because it's faster, easier, and safer than other methods for harvesting. These trees grow about 100 feet tall, and because they're a palm tree, they don't have any branches. So, luckily, there are other options for harvesting, such as climbing methods, like the one that you see here, which was actually developed by a local group who was interested in finding a more sustainable method to harvest the fruit. However, most of the fruit is harvested by cutting right now. And so what I'm interested in doing is looking at why people make a decision to cut rather than climb, and what options we can develop to encourage climbing, or to support climbing, or to teach climbing, and also if there are other options in terms of income for people in the forest. So this fruit market supports thousands of people in the Peruvian Amazon, many of whom have less than an elementary school education and don't have a lot of other options in terms of employment or income. So what I'm going to go through now are my 3 objectives for my research and what I'm planning to do for my doctoral dissertation. The first thing I want to do is map the change over time. So we can actually use satellite data to look at where the tree used to be and where the tree is now. This is an example from a deforestation research project in Brazil. So this one, it's very obvious. You can see there used to be trees, and now we have a bunch of bare soil. What's really cool about this project is these images are from Google Earth. So Google Earth is freely available, and you guys can do this at home because there's now a time-lapse feature on the program. The second thing I want to do is to document and understand the market. So I mentioned harvesters, wholesalers, vendors, and consumers. These are all people that make choices in their daily lives about how to harvest, how to sell, who to buy from, who to sell fruit to. And all of these choices impact the environment around them. And what I want to know is, what do these people think about their choices? Do they know how aguaje is harvested? If you're somebody who's eating the fruit in the city, do they know that the tree is being cut down? Do they care? Do they want to do something else? Are they interested in buying other fruit or doing having other options in terms of income and choices in harvesting? My last objective is to develop management options. And for this part of my dissertation, I'm not interested in writing a plan and handing it to the people that are down there. What I want to do is work with all the stakeholders along the market chain. So I want to bring in harvesters, wholesalers, vendors, and consumers. And I want to talk to them about how we can develop good options that people understand, that people will be willing to implement, and that will be long-term. So what I want to leave you guys with is that conservation is not just about the plants and animals out there in nature away from us, but it's also about the people who use, depend on, need these species out in the forest. Thank you all for your time, and I can take any questions. Yes?
If they're cutting the trees down, how long does it take for a mature tree to be able to start producing again?
From seed, it takes about 10 years, but the limiting factor in the rainforest, and actually it's similar here in the forests in the East Coast, is light. And so if a seed is growing and there's not a gap in the canopy, it can stay a little tree for a really long time. But then when there's a light opening, like when you cut down a tree, it can shoot up a lot faster, but it's usually about 10 years. So it takes quite a lot of time before a forest regenerates after it's been cut. Yes?
How do you spell the name of the tree?
It's aguaje, it's like agua, the Spanish word for water, and then J-E. And that reflects the fact that it lives next to rivers and in swampy areas, so it's really wet. Yes?
Can you describe what this fruit tastes like?
Yes, it tastes to me like a sour potato. So It's not what people usually think of when they think of fruit. It's not sweet like a pineapple or a banana. It's more like an avocado type fruit. You know, it's savory. Yes.
I thought you said that one of the things you'd like to find out is why people cut versus climb.
Yeah.
So do you have some hypotheses about that?
Yeah, so we actually climbed some trees last summer to see what it was like, and it's very scary. They're 100 feet tall, and it's like climbing a pole, and it looks a lot more secure than it feels. And so there's not, people don't go to school. There's not a mechanism to teach people. So if you were to just hand somebody a harness, I would be reluctant to climb. It feels very dangerous. It's also much faster to just cut down the tree. So, yeah.
Is there a government agency that's involved in management?
Yes, definitely. There are a few. So they have a state system and a federal system, kind of like we do, and they have both state laws and federal laws. There is a tax that is supposed to be implemented that is intended to reduce harvest and consumption, but it's not enforced, and I can't figure out if it's ever actually been collected. But in the books, there is a law saying there's a tax, and there are some areas like reserves where you're not supposed to harvest the tree. But when we talk to people and say, where did you get this tree? They'll be like, oh, right there in the reserve. There's lots of trees in there. So there's not a lot of enforcement. That's one of the big issues. And so that's why we're trying to work with stakeholders directly instead of going through the legal route, because that hasn't worked in the past. Yes?
What other species grow in the same region as the awahe that are also clear-cut out of the forest
So
that
actually,
may be impacting that
yeah.
satellite view?
Right, so the satellite view is just an example of deforestation in Brazil, which actually looks very different than aguaje deforestation, because aguaje grows in swamps, and so that soil type is not good for agriculture, so it's not cleared to grow cattle or plants, which is a big issue in Brazil. And the trees are not used for lumber because it's a palm tree, so it's not a hardwood. And so there's not a lot of clear cutting or other uses in this type of forest. Rather than just the fruit, and also because people know that a lot of animals eat the fruit, they know to go to these areas to go hunting. So a lot of indigenous people will visit the aguaje stands in order to hunt peccary or even tapir or other species.
Is it almost an invasive species by the number of trees that...
No, there was actually a study out last year that looked at what's called hyperdominance, which means there's one plant or one species that dominates a stand, and it's not uncommon in the Amazon rainforest. There's about 250 species of trees that represent most of the trees. It's just all the other trees are very rare. So that's how you get a lot of different species. There's a few that you find a lot of, but then all the rest are all different. Thank you.